Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Using Digital to Drive Business Your Way, presented by John Albert, Chief Business Development Officer of Herman, and Joe Corby, Digital Agency Partner of 1631 Digital. Please be aware that there will be a question and answer portion at the end of today's webinar. Please type your questions in the question box located on the right of your screen. They will be answered in the order received. Additionally, if you would like a copy of the presentation slides to keep or to print and take notes on during today's webinar, please find them on the right of your screen in the Handouts section. They will also be emailed to all participants following the completion of today's webinar, as well as a recorded version will be available on the website for members only. Again, we would like to thank you for attending, and I will now turn things over to John and Joe.
Thank you, and thank you everybody who has joined today. We appreciate everyone taking the time to be with us for just a little bit as we talk through some current trends in the digital marketing landscape, how they can apply to the healthcare industry in particular, and why we think that digital marketing and digital advertising is an avenue that all of you should be considering for your marketing and business goals in 2020. So as we go through some things today, kind of have three main takeaways that we want to touch on. First and foremost, again, why we think that digital marketing is so important for your industry in particular, based on who your audience is and what you're trying to accomplish. We certainly want to talk through, after that, the steps to developing an effective digital marketing campaign. And we'll get into some details there. And along the way, we're going to touch on a few real-world examples, too, of some other healthcare companies and practices that are implementing some of these techniques and these trends successfully and show how they're doing it. So to get started, I think it's important to just take a step back briefly and kind of define, what is digital marketing? When we use that term, what are we referring to? Because it is a rather all-encompassing term, and it can cover a lot of different tactics. And you can see on the screen, just some of the tactics that often get lumped into this idea of digital marketing. Your website itself is a digital marketing tool, and there's search engine optimization initiatives, both organic SEO as well as search engine marketing and pay-per-click ads. Social media certainly qualifies. Instant messaging kind of along those same lines. You have programmatic digital display ads, email marketing, blogs, and other types of content marketing, cable and streaming services, viral ads, mobile ads, native ads. So there's a lot that could potentially go into a discussion on digital marketing, but we certainly don't have the time for all of that. So what we're going to do is kind of focus on these three primary areas of digital marketing: programmatic display ads, search engine marketing / pay-per-click ads, and social media advertising. And the reason that we're narrowing down to those three is that from what we found, those really are the three most prevalent tactics that go into a digital marketing campaign. And ideally, it's best if companies and practices can do an integrated campaign that touches on all three of those. But those are the ones we're going to focus on. They've been around for years, but have really come into the forefront in recent years.
Yeah, not only that, but just within the past 5 years, there's been a huge transition to these core tactics, and it started as emerging technology, and now it's really more mainstream. But these are really the ones that we would want to focus on today for this discussion, because there's just a ton of utility in each direction.
So why is digital marketing key for healthcare practices? And it really comes down to what studies are showing, how your audiences are searching for healthcare information and services and products and practices to go to. So, from some recent Pew Research studies, they found that 80% of internet users say that they've searched for health-related information online. And that is one of the most popular activities online that anyone does, behind really just email and other research for a product or service before purchase. So, that's what your audience is doing, regardless of what their ailment is or what they're looking for. They're going online first to kind of do their own research, see what they can find. And on the right-hand half of the slide here, you can see that the type of information that people are looking for is very varied as well. The two most popular searches were either for a specific disease or medical problem, or a particular medical treatment or procedure. But below that, you can see the diversity of the topics, everything from diet, nutrition, and exercise to prescription drugs, treatments, health insurance, particular hospitals and doctors. So it really is a wide variety of topics that are in play here. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you want to be where your audience is. You don't want to have to force them to come find you.
Right. I mean, the beauty of online advertising these days is just the amount of information that is now at your disposal with those search, all of that search behavior. You now have the ability to really tap into that and have more of a concentrated or a strategic delivery for your ad message.
So given that your audience is online, and that's where you need to be, what are the steps to developing an effective digital marketing campaign? And we can break that down essentially into three phases. There's the strategy phase, the creative phase, and then ultimately the implementation and kind of further refinement phase. And it's important to follow the phases in this order. You don't always see that. Sometimes companies want to jump right into the implementation and just start running ads on certain platforms for whatever reason, or they jump right into creative and they haven't really thought through the strategy or who they're trying to target. But to be effective, companies need to take the time to really go through each step of this process as thoroughly as possible in order to create the most well-rounded, sound campaign they can.
Yeah, no arguments there. I mean, obviously, with any strategy in general, you want to have a plan, and then you want to build out things to address that plan and see it through. And then, of course, employ it, get it out the door, and then be able to analyze that plan and see how the results were.
So we're going to kind of move forward through each of these phases in our presentation and kind of talk about the steps and some things that if you're considering a digital marketing campaign, or maybe you're currently doing a digital marketing campaign, that these are things you should make sure that your digital agency partner is factoring in, questions you should be asking them, just to make sure that everything has been well thought through and prepared. So again, the first phase to go through is the strategy phase, and the first step of that process really is to define your goals and what your key performance indicators are going to be. And I realize that for many of you, the ultimate goal is to bring in new patients, but sometimes that's not necessarily the goal of a particular campaign. That campaign might be one part of a multi-step process where at the very end of the day, you're getting new patients, but the campaign itself might have a different goal. And there's a lot of different goals to consider when it comes to digital marketing. It can be an awareness campaign. Obviously, it can be for new patients. If it's through Google or some other SEO initiatives, increasing that ranking could be the goal. Generating conversations online or responses, likes, followers, website traffic. All of these things could potentially be goals, and depending on what goal or goals you set, really will inform all of the decisions that you need to make after this step in the process, as far as budget and who your audience is and what platforms are the best platforms to reach them.
Yeah, no doubt. And as you decide which direction you want to go, that's also going to dictate which channel that you implement, as far as social media or SEO or, display ads. But with that, you really have a lot of flexibility and utility, with that decision. But it really comes down to what you want to accomplish and then how are you going to employ it.
So once you know what your goals are, then the next step in this process is to determine your budget, determine what spend level you need to have. And there really isn't a right answer here. So if anyone asks, well, how much do I need to spend for an effective digital marketing campaign? It's really not that simple, because it really does come down to what are your goals and who are you trying to reach in order to determine what an effective budget amount is going to be. But broadly speaking, this is one area where digital marketing really provides a lot of value compared to other forms of more traditional media.
Yeah, there's a ton of efficiencies when it comes to just selecting audiences, how granular you want to get within a particular service area, and messaging based on intended audiences, things like that. But really what it comes down to out of pocket is really sort of interesting, because we broke this down from a recent campaign that John and I had worked on. And just as far as a cost per thousand benefit statement, reach, branding, all of the things that you might look for in a campaign, the value of digital benchmarked against other traditional media is pretty significant. A $2,500 buy across the board in this market, in this DMA, the Baltimore DMA, would effectively get you 10 network commercials with a, based on gross rating points, about 65,000 impressions. Not a lot, not a ton. Local radio, about 4 commercials on, primetime morning drive. Again, typically that would get you about 50,000 impressions. Local print media, 1 ad, maybe, the 50,000 impressions, there's a lot of assumptions across the board with all of these. They're looking at circulation or estimated reach. With digital, it's a little bit more absolute. We're only charging if a human being is absorbing the content on the other side of that screen. So just in terms of how many impressions across the board, you look over on the digital side, look at just digital advertising in terms of display ads, you're looking at an effective reach or delivery of 200,000 ads going out the door in your service area. And then you look into social media, again, 200,000, effectively the same cost per thousand. But within that, you have the ability to micro-target and really dial into very particular people that might be searching for particular things, demo profiles, and just a lot of different, factors that you would probably find important for your services.
And, we'll hit on this a little bit more later in the presentation, but the other value with digital advertising or social media advertising is the ability to have multiple creative executions within a campaign. Not that you can't do that with TV or radio or with print media, but when you're doing it on a digital platform or on Facebook, you have the ability to switch those ads around, in the moment, in real time. You can A/B test with different ads, run multiple ads at once, see which ones tend to resonate best with your audience, and then run more of those ads or less of the others, or change those kinds of things. So it just offers another level of flexibility that some more traditional media channels don't offer as much of.
And then with those findings, just having the ability to adjust, and change your message.
So you have your goals, you have your budget. The next thing to do is figure out who you're trying to reach, who is your target audience. And there's kind of 2 components to this process, at least from our side of the table. And it's really this idea of using demographic information versus creating user personas. And I don't mean to set it up as an either or, really, you should be doing both. They both hold value. But the difference is, demographic data is typically thought of as more quantifiable data. It's data that can be measured, things like age, gender, education level, location, household income, that kind of stuff. You can see the different, typical categories on the slide now. And this information is incredibly important. A lot of media outlets, base numbers on this circulation. Even when we're doing, programmatic digital ads, there's a lot that can be accomplished to narrow down your target audience, based on these demographic categories. So definitely a lot of value there, definitely an important part of the process to go through.
So the demographic categories the information is actually drawn through a lot of these systems from first party, third party, and some unstructured data that the partners within each system have relationships with. And that just gives you such a huge there's so much upside with tapping into that, where you can get very accurate with all of these categories across the board.
And then in addition to the demographic data, creating user personas then allows you to kind of wrap an actual, personality, a real human person around some of those demographic factors in order to help, determine, how certain creative messaging might resonate or which particular types of media channels are going to make the most sense. And just as an example, we have here Erica, the executive, and she's kind of representative of a potential, patient that a lot of different types of medical practices might be interested in. She's in that 30 to 45-year-old range. She's managing a full-time job plus family responsibilities, and she's very busy. She has little time to spare. She's making medical appointments for herself, her family, her children, managing a lot of the finances. So convenience is of utmost importance to her. She's online. She's a very savvy consumer. She's reading product reviews. She's shopping online. She's actively using social media and blogs and websites to get her news, to get information on different types of things, more so than traditional media. Again, she's very convenience-oriented. She's looking for service providers that are close to home or her work or her children's schools, that offer extended hours, that offer more flexibility. And she's not shy about sharing her opinion online either. It's a very typical kind of modern consumer profile. But once you have something like this in place, and when we get into the creative phase of the presentation, we'll circle back to this. But you can pull out certain nuggets that can then inform your digital marketing strategy. So again, targeting convenience messaging, maybe considering the development for your practice of a blog or a newsletter she can sign up for if she's online looking for types of information to be front and center for her. She's out there reading online reviews, so make sure that your physicians have reviews online because she's going to come across them, things like that. So there's a lot of information that can be gleaned, not just for programmatic ads or Facebook ads or things along those lines, but just the broader digital marketing strategy and some of those other tactics that I touched on back in the beginning of the presentation. So then the next step in the strategy is to choose what platforms are going to make the most sense to reach that target audience that you've identified. And again, for our presentation, we've really just limited this down to the programmatic display ads, pay-per-click ads, and social media ads. But we can talk about each of those a little further. With programmatic ads, the value in them is the sheer variety of personal interest sites that they can show up on.
So with programmatic, it really puts more onus on the data that you're using and reaching the right person and connecting those dots than it has to do with what site that you actually end up on. Now, you can make an effort to, pick out particular sites ahead of time and say, we definitely want to, be on these exact sites. But at the same time, if your perfect person happens to be on USA Today or WebMD, it really doesn't matter as long as that message is in front of them. So that's what programmatic does. It uses the data, it dials into a multi-channel, effect, and then finds those people in your service area to deliver those messages on those websites and blogs and apps.
And again, you can, have your ads run on everything from national sites to specific local area sites to even industry-focused sites. So there's a lot of flexibility there.
And that list is actually growing. We're also seeing that those ads are now being delivered on newsletters. You had mentioned local blogs and just so many things that were unheard of, 3-4 years ago.
And then when it comes to pay-per-click campaigns, primarily what we're talking about here is Google Ads. There are other search engines like Bing out there that do offer ad platforms as well, but Google is really the main player. It controls roughly 3/4 of the search engine market, also roughly 3/4 of the paid search market. So that's where most people are going to do their online searches. As you can see from the stats there, 63,000 searches each second are processed by Google. And from data that they've shared, they've shown that over 40% of clicks tend to go to the top 3 paid ads in the search results. So there's obviously value in organic listings for sure, and it can even create additional levels of credibility and trust if you're in the organic listings as well as a paid ad. But even paid ads by themselves hold a lot of value. Google's paid listings tend to convert up to 50% better than organic results. And they found that search ads can help increase brand awareness by as much as 80%. And generally speaking, roughly half of web users say they can't really tell the difference anymore between a paid ad and an organic ad in the way that Google lists out their ads.
Yeah, no doubt. And when people are looking for a service, especially in the medical realm, I mean, they are looking for information. They're craving information to find solutions for things. And if you see something at the top of the fold, right next to the organic search, the propensity to click on something like that is so much higher.
And then we get into some of the different social media channels. And we'll go through a few of them here, but what's kind of important to note is that each channel does tend to cater to a little bit different audience sometimes. So it's not as much about just being on social media, but you really do have to take the time to figure out which channel or channels are going to most likely capture the audience you're after. Now, Facebook is obviously the biggest one. The most consistent mobile users and desktop users, they spend a good amount of time on Facebook per day, and very high percentages within each age group are on Facebook. So you'll see when we get to a few of the other channels that there's not quite as widespread.
And the way that you look at this slide, just point of explanation, when you look at age, that points to 88% of that age group have a Facebook account, right? 84% of 30 to 49, 50 to 60. Now, you can target each one. It's not one or the other, with a Facebook campaign. You can really dial in and use some of the best practices that we're talking about. But that's just an incredible number or percentage of the population.
So then, by comparison, Instagram tends to skew to a much younger audience and a much more female audience as well. People aren't on Instagram quite as long per day, but if you think through what Instagram really is, I mean, it's really just photo sharing primarily. So, that's another factor to consider with your practices, whether your messaging can be effectively communicated that way. This might be your target audience, but it still may not be the right platform depending on how you're disseminating your message. Twitter, by comparison, incredibly small amount of time per day on Twitter. People are really just scrolling through headlines. But Twitter is probably best thought of for news-related content. So if you're sharing some type of content piece that has some news value to it and some educational value, maybe it directs somebody back to your website, Twitter could still be a very effective platform to consider.
Yeah, definitely better for the quick hits, announcements, things like that. Think of the end result of Twitter. I don't think anyone's going to do any massive research, just from a Twitter ad. But, you keep the branding out there. If it's of interest and it resonates with somebody and they like you or they follow you, they might check you out on other channels.
And then the last one to touch on here is YouTube. And a couple stats to really point out on this slide are that YouTube skews to a more male audience, and also the average amount of time per day on YouTube is incredibly long. People get on YouTube and they're watching videos, and I think they tend to kind of get lost in the space a little bit. But YouTube can be an excellent platform if you're able to share patient testimonials, things along those lines that kind of would resonate with your audience on maybe more of an emotional level, and really use the benefits of video to your advantage.
So incredible engagement with YouTube. They have ads that you must endure before you're actually absorbing the content that you want to see anyway. So, that's good to get your message across. It's good where you can go in a lot of different directions, have a lot of different videos, and capture that engagement level.
And then the last part of the strategy phase has to do with types of different ads you can run on these platforms. And to some extent, the type of ad is going to be dictated by the platform. Each platform kind of offers different options. But just to touch on a few, you can certainly do kind of more traditional banner ads, especially for programmatic digital, and even Google's display network as well that will run display ads. This example here for the Centers for Advanced Orthopedics is a good one. They actually had display ads on both sides. You can also do what's called sponsored content, where your practice is creating more of a thought leadership or educational piece designed to present you as an expert in whatever your given area is. And there are sites out there like WebMD that have separate sections for content from sponsors. But there's other websites out there too, and blogs and other opportunities where if the firm is, or if the practice is writing an article about a particular topic, that can be kind of treated as sponsored content too. So in this case, that content could be something like an article. It could also be, what Dexcom did here. This is the link from the WebMD one, where they basically created an entire microsite around their monitoring product and type 2 diabetes and that sort of thing. So there's educational value there for the user. You can see some symptoms. There's some patient testimonials, things along those lines. So it's not a link directly to Dexcom's website or selling their product directly, but it's more of positioning them as the expert in this type of information and sort of working to build that trust with the consumer.
And with all of this content, it's very friendly to drive traffic from all of the channels. You could drive somebody from a social media campaign or Google campaign or display campaign back to these particular pages. And so you have that flexibility to reach particular people with a message and then bring them back to the page that is relevant and takes them through the steps of service and benefit statement and everything that you want to get in front of them.
And then you can obviously do video ads as well, whether that's pre-roll video or, there's some various options there, but that's certainly a possibility too with display ads.
So video online has really transitioned again in the past 5 years. You're seeing more and more video on social media. When you go through your scroll, you'll see a lot of people are taking advantage of video. But just online, you'll see lots more click-to-play, a lot more auto-play on websites like CNN or Fox News or the Weather Channel. But then if you go one step further into, emerging technology, people are playing their videos as 15 or 30-second commercials that are now programmatically being delivered on smart TVs or gaming devices or Roku or anything that's unconnected. What I mean by that is things that aren't connected to satellite TV or cable, all other devices, OTT, over the top. So it's going to get more and more in a lot more directions, but connected TV is a great opportunity to align yourself with particular channels and content that's relative to what you do.
So then moving on from the programmatic world into some of the pay-per-click stuff. Obviously Google has its own display network, but when most people think of Google ads, they're thinking of the text-based ads that are in the search results. So here's one example where you have a headline, you have a short blurb of descriptive copy, and then a link to wherever you want to take that person next. But in addition to opportunities with Google or even Bing, if you wanted to consider them, there are other websites out there in the industry that also offer sponsored listings. So any of these types of opportunities are things that should certainly be considered. And then obviously you get into social media and you get into Facebook, and they have their own types of ads, whether it's static image ads or rotating image ads on Facebook or video, even on a lot of these platforms. So figuring out what platforms you want to be on first will help inform the decisions of the types of ads that make the most sense. And that does lead us into the next phase of an effective digital marketing campaign. That's the creative phase. So why is creative execution critical? Other than the obvious of you want to sell your brand and that sort of thing. The bigger takeaway we found is that Microsoft did a study a couple years ago that determined that human attention span is only 8 seconds nowadays, which is even shorter than that of a goldfish, which is actually kind of a little sad, but that's kind of where we are right now with the amount of media that everyone's being inundated with, and the use of technology and the internet and everything. You don't have a lot of time to grab someone's attention, and that 8 seconds is down from 12 seconds back in a study they did in 2000. So, humans essentially lost a quarter of their attention span in the last 20 years. So, given that you don't have a lot of time to reach somebody, you really have to develop creative that is clear, that maybe splits the content into smaller, more easily digestible pieces, and try to use as many visuals as possible to grab somebody's attention. Not as many visuals, but make it as visual as possible.
Yeah.
And as personalized as possible to really speak to that audience and what they're going to react to.
The goal is to find the right audience with a compelling message that has a strong call to action, so they can just immediately take that goldfish time frame and be imported into your site.
And we really can't overstate the importance of having a strong call to action. That the audience needs something to grab onto. They need something to do. And if we go back to our example of Erica, the executive, what's going to move the needle for her? What's going to resonate? And we can pull out a few things, from that profile that can inform, our creative process. Again, the fact that she's moving fast, she has little time to spare, she's shopping online, she's using online websites, blogs, social media to get her news and information. She's very convenience oriented. She's looking for extended hours and things nearby her house. So, let's say that you're a small pediatrics facility and you're trying to reach Erica. Doing your message around some of those factors, like this Florida pediatrics group did, are really done in a way that would resonate with this type of persona. Ads that focus on their 24-hour service, their virtual capabilities, things along those lines.
The images can't be understated either. I mean, if you look at her situation and what we know about her, family is important. Having those images strike her when it comes onto the page, and then seeing a very strong headline and call to action down at the bottom, and then it's very clear who that ad's for.
And then when you take the user to your website, carrying through that creative vision, that look, that feel, is incredibly important as well to make the viewer feel like they're part of the same brand experience with your practice.
Yeah, with all of those different creative aspects that was on the previous slide, it's really important to have all of the different channels have a uniform sort of look and feel and headlines and bringing them back to a landing page that looks like it goes with the ad.
And the development of really tailored landing pages is a critical step in the process too, that I feel a lot of companies and practices, not just in the healthcare industry, but in a lot of industries, maybe overlook the importance of. A lot of times people think that you run an ad and it can just link back to my homepage and that's sufficient. But really it's not, and you really want to have a very tailored experience for the viewer that goes to the information they're seeking as quickly as possible. You don't want to make them have to search for it again. So, for example, this is a campaign for a local eye care and laser center that was doing a promotion for their LASIK services, and rather than just go back to their homepage and then force the viewer to go find the LASIK section and learn more, it takes them to a page that was custom developed specifically for this promotion. If they want to then explore more, they have the opportunity to, but they're immediately getting the information that they came for. Similarly, this campaign was for a local county health department. and a smoking cessation initiative. But rather than go to the main health department website and have to sift through, all the, dozens of different types of health initiatives that they have out there, they created a microsite specifically for their smoking cessation services. So when the viewer comes to the page, they get that content. They're able to download the, tips to quitting brochures and watch the videos they need to watch and those types of things without having to spend extra time and energy and attention that we know they don't have trying to get that information.
Yeah, the goal is to be as turnkey as possible. Going back to the goldfish, it has to be clear, blunt messaging, get them into the portal that you want them to be in, and then once they're there, activate them into a subsequent action so that you can get their information and continue the conversation with them and get them the help that they're looking for.
And when you're thinking through, what type of content you can focus your campaign on, consider, other options besides just kind of brand awareness messaging, to make it a little more educational, a little more content marketing focused, in order to really kind of grab, someone's attention now and draw them back to learn more. So whether that's, maybe doing webinars that people can come back to your site and sign up for, using, news items on Twitter, in combination with your actual social media accounts to generate interest. If you have a newsletter or can create a newsletter that people can sign up for to, continue receiving information of interest, or similarly a blog, different things that you can do to position your practice again as a thought leader in a particular space, and then use that content as the basis for your campaign messaging to reach out to that audience and then draw them back in to your site.
Content is king, and it's searchable. When people are looking for very particular things, you want to be the resident expert for each one of those categories or services that you offer, and bringing them back there is going to help your organic as well as, helping your bottom line by getting people to sign up for things.
And that brings us to the third and final step of the campaign development process, which is the implementation phase. And specifically the use of artificial intelligence and data optimization to implement these campaigns. So there's a number of different ways that we look at a campaign as it's unfolding. We're looking at a lot of parameters that we feel are important. If you go back to Erica, the executive, we kind of know a little bit about, who she is, who we want to reach, and we dial into those parameters or with particular tactics. And as the campaign unfolds, it's not like the good old days of, or not so good old days of digital, where you sort of hedge your bets and you put your, all of your targeting in an across-the-board tactic, and at the end of the month, you kind of live with the performance. Now we're looking at performance on, in some cases, real time, but, a typical inside look at a campaign is we're looking at the campaign at least daily, and we're finding out what is resonating with people, what tactics, it could be keywords, it could be demo profiling, audience tactics, contextual alignments, and looking at the universe of what is working, and then just having that flexibility to push the budget of the month into those particular tactics to maximize the results. As you go through, you do have a lot of opportunity to sort of guardrail some things that aren't working and take them out, purge them. But at the same time, the goal here is to get people onto your site and have them take a subsequent action. So if it's not working, it might work next month, but let's go with the hot hand here and, optimize in real time. And then other platforms like Google and Facebook and Twitter have a lot of artificial intelligence built into their platforms. So when you're creating a campaign like this slide shows for Facebook, there's a lot of, my apologies, I'm fighting off a cold here. There's a lot of different variables that you can fill in for your target audience. You can, in addition to geofencing by certain locations and some of the demographic information like age ranges and genders, that you can also do additional, more detailed targeting based on personal interests and things like that. Pages on Facebook that people have liked or signed up to receive notices from or whatever, to really kind of narrow in the focus of your audience. To help ensure that when your ads are displayed, they're displayed to people that are likely to react to them.
So Facebook does a thing, and you'll see it right of rail, the estimated daily results, that 8.2 thousand to 24,000. That is based on Facebook's records of that they've pulled directly from their first-party data of what they know about the people within that particular area. And you put in the parameters and it calculates, all right, we have an effective reach of this many. If you go back to the previous slide, ultimately that's based on a number of different data points. It's a little bit more well-rounded, and you can sort of position it based off a lot of first-party and third-party, and then some sort of real-time effects where you're geofencing or pulling in information as it sort of shows itself. But they both have a place in an integrated campaign where you're systematically accomplishing two different things. So with Facebook, they're very transparent with what they can bring to the table. They're never going to oversell you, in a particular area, and sometimes they underdeliver. So there's that. So you can reinvest that throughout the course of the month, but there's a lot of opportunity to really get detailed with your targeting. With Facebook, and then Facebook leads to Instagram, and then Twitter is a whole other kettle of fish, but lots of ability to really get granular.
And then once the campaign starts running, all this data starts coming in, what data should you really focus on to tell if a campaign's working or not?
That's a good question. Going back to how we look at a campaign, we look at it in a high level on the front end, and then try to really, really clue into that performance as it unfolds. What we try to do with the typical campaign is really pack it with tactics that are, particular to the service or the group that we're working with. And typically those groups know enough about their customer pool where they know the keywords, they know the service area, and they know the types of people, like Erica, the executive, that we can build a blueprint and find more people that look like those people. But throughout the course of the campaign lifespan, we're looking at each one as an individual target, and then really focusing in on what's working the best, and then purging out what's not doing so great, and then just continuing that optimization process of refinement, and then hopefully the campaign gets stronger and stronger. So this is a look at how granular we can get. One of the tactics is keyword. Now this differs from a typical Google campaign. This is in keyword performance as it pertains to a programmatic campaign. And the difference there is you're not paying per keyword with this. What we're doing here is we're throwing out a number or a list of things that we think are important to the practice. And we're saying, okay, as people show themselves through search behavior, let's retarget those people. So it's based more on demand as opposed to just paying for each individual. So you can give a list in the world of programmatic of 500 different keywords. If people aren't searching for those keywords, you're not going to pay for them. But then it really maximizes, and clues in on the most obvious people that are searching for particular things. Geographic performance is always going to be important. You want to know that you're not overshooting your message to patients that, in all likelihood would not be coming to your practice. So you have the ability to, in all forms, to really have those guardrails up and target by region or city, DMA, or neighborhood, even down to street level, block level, things like that. and on the back end, be able to see that delivery and really in granular terms. Creative performance. This goes back to what we were talking about with the A/B testing and having the ability or a utility to adjust your message. We look at creative performance down to the ad size level. You can also do this as far as identifying the headline. Say if you look at the top one, urgent care. If that just said urgent care, and we had 5 different ad sizes, we can contrast that to other messages in this exact same format. But this is a great example of how we can see what ad size is really getting the most play, the most clicks, and then in some cases we're building more ad sizes to meet that demand.
And then when you get into Google or Facebook or other social media platforms, they obviously have their own results, campaign performance platforms, built in as well. So you can, see by demographic, by placement, by whatever. And when you set up these campaigns on those platforms, you are often setting up what those conversion metrics are going to be, what counts as a win, so to speak. So is it a click to view a landing page? Is it a click to sign up for something? There's a lot of different opportunities there. But then you can base the success of the campaign around whether it met those goals.
Yeah, there's a number of conversion points that you could look at and record. Everything from watching a video to signing up for things to asking for an email address.
So then the last thing we want to touch on a little bit was just the issues around compliance, especially in this industry with privacy issues and things along those lines. So Joe, if you can talk a little bit about how you handle those types of compliance issues.
Sure. So obviously everyone has to be mindful of the HIPAA rules, and as it pertains to digital outreach, you can't go after sensitive information as it pertains to patients, and and that is everything from your patients to your competitor set patients. And a lot of these targeting tactics, we're looking at behavior, which is a little bit different because you're positioning ads on websites, and it's almost like a product placement. So you're safe there. What you're not really, what would be a bad course of action under the HIPAA rules would be targeting a hospital or an urgent care center with a geofence, and then targeting them with, sensitive, with product information for a competing firm. There's some state legislation out there right now that is going to eliminate that. I know some states, I believe Maine, has already taken that process, and you can't do that. But across the board, just be mindful of information that you're targeting based on people's names or addresses, or texting people that you have their cell phone information. But HIPAA is pretty clear, and after this this overview, we can probably post a direct link to those rules.
So just to kind of wrap things up, we wanted to leave everyone with 3 tips for the road, so to speak, things you can take back with you and consider moving forward as you think about either undertaking a digital marketing campaign or continuing one maybe that you're already on.
So there's a lot that we just unpacked here, but ultimately the bottom line with any marketing in 2020 is you have to have some form of a digital strategy. You can't go wrong with any of the ones that we had talked about, because all advertising is good, and you want to be able to have a presence in each. But I think really what you want to have is more of an integrated campaign. If you can do all levels that we had talked about, that's a luxury. But I think what we need to do is really determine what is right for your practice, and then build out that plan, and then have some form of digital minimum expectation each month. A good course of action is to obviously see what's working, and then inflate that effort. And that's everything from what's working for you, and then also what's working for your competitor set. You know, it's a very transparent world when it comes to marketing. You can see your competitors' ads, and they're probably targeting the same people you are. So look at what's working for them, mimic it, and try and overcome that. Make sure your messaging is uniform across all channels. We had touched on that with the creative, but you don't want to have the look of 10 different campaigns, you know, bringing, you know, with 10 different color schemes and photo looks and headlines that bring you back to a landing page that has nothing to do with that initial message. So keep it uniform. If you see something on Twitter or, you know, display ads on CNN or Fox News or Weather Channel, make it look uniform and bring it back to a core landing page that looks like it goes with the flow of the message.
And just to add on to what Joe's saying, you know, the old rule of thumb used to be that a prospective buyer would need to see an ad roughly about 7 times before they would take action. You know, the first couple times might get ignored, then eventually they start to recall the ad, they become more familiar with it, and eventually they get to the point of maybe either asking some questions about it or looking up some more information or eventually, hopefully, making a buying decision. And I think that number has probably only gone up in recent years, just with the influx of other, you know, media channels and how saturated the market is and how often, you know, your audience is being bombarded with all sorts of different types of media. So that really just makes it even more important to make sure that your creative maintains a uniform execution, so that, you know, the user realizes they're seeing the same messaging 10 times, not 10 different messages.
No doubt. And I mean, just with everything that we talked about in conjunction with social media and all the different ways that people are absorbing content, there's a ton of advertising out there that people are exposed to. So you want to stand out, and you want to make it clear, and you want to take advantage of that short attention span, bring them back with a clear turnkey message.
So at this point, with I guess just a few minutes left, we're happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you, guys. So now I'm going to read the questions from the question box. If anyone has any additional questions they'd like to ask, please type them in the question box located on the right of your screen now. So the first question we'll start with is, what is considered a good and average click-through rate for your industry?
That's a great question. I mean, much of the conversation today has been analyzing the performance and monitoring what you're going to do with that performance, pushing things in different directions. But if you really consider, if you know what the average click-through rate might be, you need to know what the benchmark, you know, the baseline is of good performance to determine that, right? So if you don't know that, here we are. So we just received some information across the board for display ads. The effective average, industry average is, and there's a lot of different data points that we point to here, but across the board, it ranges between a 0.05% and a 0.10%. So that's across the board with all different sort of channels in play. But if you go into this type of approach, the click-through rates tend to be a lot higher because we're really we're zoning in into very obvious people. And when you know have very good messaging along with very good targeting, you're going to get very good results. So I would look for in you know a typical programmatic campaign, you're looking at you know in medical between a 0.10 and a 0.20%.
Okay, thank you. And at this time, we do not have any questions. We could give a few more seconds to see if any last minute ones come through. Okay, well, if there's no questions, then we have no problem wrapping this up. Thank you, John and Joe, for a great presentation. Once again, the presentation slides will be emailed to all participants and will be available on our website for members only, as well as we will be sending a quick survey your way because your feedback is important to us. If you have any additional questions, please reach out to the presenters directly. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you, everyone, for your time. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.